Welcome to Pat's Cast. I think we're all feeling pretty good about the New England Patriots coming off of last week's Sunday night victory on the road against the Buffalo Bills. And I think it's safe to say this is a pretty good football team. Are they great? Are they a Super Bowl contender? I think that might be a bit of a reach right now, and want to have a bit of a reality check here because I think we should raise the bar on what we expect from the Patriots, but also understand that this is the NFL. There is a ton of parity. I mean, just last night, the New York Football Giants blew out, in fact, the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Divisional game, Patriots won a divisional game last week. All sorts of weird things happen in the NFL. So I think we can't be overly optimistic coming out of this victory because the reality is this Patriots team still has a long way to go if they want to be, in fact, a great team. Like I said, I think they're a good team right now, but we have the potential to overstate their standing in the NFL, particularly with their next few winnable games that are on the schedule. They have the Saints coming up on Sunday, the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, then the Atlanta Falcons. Patriots are favored in all of those games right now, and they should be able to win all of those games. I'm not saying they're going to. I mean, like I said, it's the NFL. Weird things happen, but they could very well head into Week 10 of the NFL season with a 7-2 record, which is way ahead of anything that we all thought. So I'm going to break down what's going well so far, what needs improvement, and what I'd like to see the Patriots do over the next few weeks so they can be in that conversation of one of the better teams in the NFL. Because I don't think they're quite there yet. Even though they beat one of the best teams in the NFL last week, they still have a ways to go. But very encouraging so far, and it starts with the quarterback. Anyone that says Drake Maye is not ahead of schedule has not been watching. I mean, heading into the season, there were a few things we knew Drake would need to clean up. That run-first mentality that he has, the kid coming out of college, his accuracy throwing the football, protecting the football, stepping up in big game situations where he often crumbled last season, turned the football over in late game situations. So far this season, he's been great. A 108 or near 108 quarterback ranking through 5 weeks. That puts him at 6th in the NFL. He ranks 2nd currently in completion percentage at 74%. Completed 13 of 14 passing in the second half against the Buffalo Bills last week. His first game-winning drive of his career. He's currently 5th in passing yards, 1261, 5th in yards per attempt. And he hasn't turned the football over since week 3. So if he continues to play this way, particularly against their weak schedule where they can beat up on some bad teams, Drake Maye will be in the MVP conversation. So can he stay consistent? There's things he needs to improve on. Of course, there's the mechanics. That's nothing he's going to be able to fix overnight. That's something that's going to take years. But even the mechanics are looking a little bit better these last couple of weeks. Keeping his eyes downfield when the pocket begins to collapse. He's great outside the pocket, but when he's under pressure, sometimes he drops his head and doesn't always make the right decision and misses open receivers. So he needs to get better at that, certainly. And, of course, continue taking care of the football, right? I mean, that third quarter pick against Vegas was pretty dumb. Of course, the turnovers, the fumble, the red zone interception against Pittsburgh. Can he continue to string together games without turning the football over? If he can continue to do that and keep putting up these types of numbers in this Josh McDaniels offense, I don't just think he's a Pro Bowler. I'm not saying he's going to win the MVP, but he could be in that conversation. And right now, he is in the conversation of one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he is a top 10 guy. Like, maybe heading into the season, you would say he's like 15th, 16th, 17th. But now you have to argue, maybe top 5 is a bit of a reach because of all the great players even that are struggling so far this season. But he's been a top 5 player this season, and I think, at the very least, he belongs in the top 10 conversation. So, very encouraging for Drake Maye so far this season, but things he still needs to clean up. And can he continue to take care of the football, be accurate throwing the football, make good decisions? He's come a long way just in the last couple of weeks, so that's good to see, but still things that I think he needs to work on. And like I said, the mechanics are going to take a long time for him to fix. But hey, he fixes his mechanics a couple seasons down the road, sky's the limit for this quarterback, and we could see MVPs in the future. But I think the biggest disappointment so far the Patriots this season, it's a little strange what's going on with the Patriots. We thought, where are their weaknesses heading into the season? They have a young quarterback. They have a young offensive line. Maybe they don't have the best receiving core in the NFL, but they have a good running back room. That's all been flipped on its head. The quarterback's been great. The receivers have been pretty good the last couple of weeks. The offensive line has been better than expected, but the running backs have been a real disappointment. First off, you lost Antonio Gibson last season. Tough blow there. It was a great three-headed monster between him, Ramondre Stevenson, and Travion Henderson, who's coming into his own. You lose Gibson, suddenly you go from a good position group to a weaker position group. Of course, Ramondre Stevenson, very reliable when he holds on to the football, but of course he's fumbled the ball 3 times already this season. That has continued to be an issue bleeding in from last season into this one. And then Travion Henderson hasn't been quite as impactful as I think we thought he was going to be during the preseason. He looks very different against NFL starters. Not to say he hasn't had his moments during the regular season, but the explosiveness that we saw in the preseason, the confidence, just hasn't quite been there as we saw before the season started. And he also isn't the same blocker he was in college. And that was one of the strengths heading into the NFL is, hey, you have a guy who's going to be able to block NFL rushers right away. Ramondre Stevenson is the preference in those situations in terms of chipping, in terms of blocking and picking up the blitz. Stevenson has been more reliable in those situations than Travion Henderson has so far, perhaps because he's a little undersized. So hopefully that's something he can continue to get better at, but it hasn't fully translated from college to the NFL, so he needs to get better at that. And right now, the Patriots, they're 25th in the NFL in rushing yards. We were hoping this would be a top 10 team in terms of rushing, and you take out Drake Maye from the equation, it's probably a lot worse than that. And they're 28th in the NFL in yards per carry. And last week they were going up against Buffalo, who we know is a good defense, a good team overall, but they're ranked 31st right now in the NFL in terms of run defense, and they were only able to muster up 59 yards on the ground last Sunday. So we thought this was going to be a run-first offense, and you slowly ease Drake Maye into things. No, they haven't been able to do that, and instead you've had to rely on Drake Maye to put on his cape, Stephon Diggs to put on his cape, and for the Patriots to make explosive plays, which thankfully they have, but that's not exactly been their MO over the last few seasons. So the running game really needs to improve, and like I said, we said this would be one of the best running back rooms in the NFL, so maybe it's the offensive line, right? And I think the run blocking for sure could be a lot better. Will Campbell ranks 42 out of 112 tackles in terms of run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. 42 is not bad. Jared Wilson really has not been great in terms of run blocking. He's 92nd out of 105 NFL guards. Ben Brown, who started one game, to his credit, he's actually ranked at 24th, but just hasn't gotten a ton of playing time. Be interesting to see if Wilson continues to struggle there at left guard, if Ben Brown's going to start to see the starting lineup a little bit more. But Wilson has struggled. Garrett Bradbury, we said it was his strength heading into the season. He may not be the best pass protector, but he's a good run blocker. That hasn't been the case. And I think Bradbury's been a pleasant surprise overall, but he's 42nd overall out of 48 NFL centers. So his run blocking has been a disaster for a player that we all said that was his greatest strength. And then on the right side, it's been a little bit better. Mike Onwenu, 27th in the NFL out of 105 guards in terms of run blocking. And Morgan Moses is 27th overall out of 112 tackles. So the right side is doing their job. Most of the struggles are on the interior between Jared Wilson, Garrett Bradbury, and of course some of the miscommunication issues that we've seen at times between Will Campbell and Jared Wilson. And the wide zone stuff has actually been a lot better than the power runs between the tackles, which is a bit of a surprise. But I do think the issue isn't so much that the offensive lineman can't block. It's more of the second level stuff. It's more of when you have to do a double team, are you going off of that first blocker? Even Morgan Moses, are you going off of that first blocker and getting to the second and creating openings? So instead of a 2 to 3 yard gain, you're getting a 7 to 10 yard gain. They haven't been very good there, but it's not just on the offensive line, right? I mean, the running backs play a factor in that. The fullback, Jack Westover, is a factor in that. And most importantly, the tight ends. As great as this tight end group is with Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, they're not exactly blocking tight ends. They're excellent pass catchers, but they aren't, dual threat tight ends like Gronk, who you could ask him to do anything out there and he could do it. Patriots don't really have that guy, so they've been leaning on Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper to block and create some of those open gaps, and they really haven't done a very good job at that. So it falls on the O-line, it falls on the fullback, and it falls on the tight ends and the wide receivers to a certain extent to help with the running game. So it's an all-around effort there that needs to get cleaned up. And in my opinion, I think this is the greatest liability to the Patriots right now. That what might prevent them from being a good team, from going from being a good team to being a great team, is running the football. Again, this was supposed to be their greatest strength heading into the season, and they haven't been able to do it so far. You can't expect Drake Maye to continue to playing the way he has. Teams are going to make adjustments against Drake Maye, right? He's been very effective rolling to his right, throwing to the football. At some point, defenses are going to take that away from him, force him to go to his left, which he's also pretty good at, but you can't expect him to constantly put on his cape because they just can't run the football. They need to be getting 100 yards per game on the ground, and right now they haven't even been close to that. So we're 5 weeks through the season. Pat still can't really run the ball effectively. Is the problem perhaps that they're trying to do too much? I mean, they're basically doing a bit of everything that you see in the NFL between the wide zone, the power running. I think at some point they're going to need to pick an identity there, right? And that might involve Josh McDaniels having to continue calling plays that he never really called before as a head coach or in his previous stints as an offensive coordinator in New England. He's not a wide zone West Coast guy, but with the players that he has, with what they've been able to put on the field so far, with their greatest strengths, they should be running more like a West Coast offense, and they kind of have at certain points. So maybe that's the solution. If they can't run between the tackles, maybe you continue to run kind of a hybrid between the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offense and the more conservative approach that Josh McDaniels has taken with Tom Brady over the years. They're going to need to find that balance and eventually lean into something if they can't continue to run the football. So that needs to get better. And I talked about the O-line a little bit in terms of run blocking, which needs to improve, but the pass blocking has been pretty good, right? Way ahead of schedule from where we expected. Will Campbell, 24th in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, out of 112 tackles in terms of pass blocking. Jared Wilson has been a lot better. He's more in the middle of the pack. He's 59th out of 105 guards. Garrett Bradbury, who wasn't supposed to be a great pass blocker, is actually 10th in the NFL amongst 48 centers overall. Mike Onwenu's been great, 11th out of 105 guards. And Morgan Moses has been solid, 48 out of 112 tackles. So this unit has been a pleasant surprise so far this season. Can they get the running game going? I think the pass protection is there. Even against teams with pretty decent edge rushers, that they've had their mistakes, certainly, but they've held their own. So that's been a pleasant surprise. Wide receivers, particularly Stephon Diggs, has been a pleasant surprise as well. I said heading into the season, my expectation for Stephon Diggs is a little bit higher than most people, and I think he should be a number one wide receiver, and maybe not right away, but by midway through the season, yeah, I was hoping at that point he would be a number one guy, and it kind of started that way. He did struggle a little bit. Just 6 catches for 57 yards against Vegas, 4 catches for 32 yards against Miami, and then it even went down a little bit more, 3 catches for 23 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Stephon Diggs broke loose. 6 catches for 101 yards against Carolina, and of course last week, 10 catches for almost 150 yards for Stephon Diggs. So, yeah, it took him a little bit. He's in a new offense, coming off of a brutal ACL injury. Never really seen a recovery like that for a guy who's in his 30s at this point in his career. Stephon Diggs hasn't skipped a beat, so that's been a pleasant surprise. He is your number one wide receiver. He will continue to be your number one wide receiver if he's healthy out there. So that's been great. I think Kayshon Boutte also, the numbers may not splash off the page, but most of his catches are big game receptions. I'm not going to complain about him so far as an ex-wide receiver. Demario Douglas, on the other hand, who I thought was going to have a breakthrough year, has been a massive disappointment. He just cannot play versus zone coverage. He just isn't on the same page as Drake Maye is in those situations, sitting in the soft spots in the zone, unlike Stephon Diggs, who is a master at that. And he's an NFL veteran, but you would think Demario Douglas would have figured that out at this point. You want to play Douglas when you're going against real man-to-man defenses that play primarily in man, but we are seeing a lot of zone so far this season. Teams run zone because they don't want Drake Maye making plays with his legs. They want their DBs to be watching the quarterback in case he runs, whereas against man, they're focused on the receiver and Maye can run around. So I think you're going to see a lot more zone. And that means I don't know if there is quite a role for Demario Douglas in this offense, and he's getting less opportunities because of it. Now, surprisingly, he's been pretty good as a blocker for a little guy out there. But as I've said many times, at some point I'd love to see Efton Chisholm get a shot there. But even he might have some limited opportunities because Diggs is getting a lot more playing time in the slot, as we saw last week. But here's the thing, Stephon Diggs, with all that he's done the last couple of weeks, he's still only playing about 50% of the reps. And I'm not sure you're going to see him play more than, 60, 70%. So that does present an opportunity for a guy like Efton Chisholm if it's not working with Demario Douglas. But the truth is, defenses still don't take the Patriots receivers very seriously. And I think this is actually a big reason why the running game overall is ultimately struggling. Defenses are stacking the box against the Patriots. They're just taking away the run altogether and saying, all right, make some plays to your receivers. And this is part of the reason, in my opinion, why I think Stephon Diggs has really been able to take over the last couple of games, because defenses are trying to stop the run against the Patriots. And that's why Diggs is having an excellent time out there. He's actually second in EPA right now versus single high safety coverages. So it's very possible, now that Stephon Diggs has had a couple of great weeks, that we start to see more of the modern two safety look from defenses. We'll see if it happens against the Saints this week. But we haven't seen that so far. So, if we do see two high safeties and they're not stacking the box, Patriots probably can run the football a little bit better. But right now, defenses are still focusing, as great as Diggs has been, even coming out of the Carolina game. Buffalo just said, hey, we're going to stop the run. And if Diggs has a few splash plays, so be it. The Patriots aren't going to be able to run the football. Didn't work out very well for them, so we'll see if defenses adjust. But, as much as I like Kayshon Boutte, they still are missing that number 2 wide receiver threat. And if they aren't respecting any of the pass catchers outside of Diggs and maybe Hunter Henry, that is the key to unlocking this team. You need another outside threat, whether that's someone on the current team, putting Efton Chisholm in the mix, or even making a trade, right? I don't think it's very likely that the Philadelphia Eagles trade away A.J. Brown, but Patriots are the obvious destination if that happens. He's not happy in Philly. The Eagles are really struggling right now the last couple of games. And even when they were winning football games, A.J. Brown was complaining, which is a bit of a red flag in my opinion, but he's also a guy who is paid like a star NFL ex-receiver, and he wants to get his targets, and he's just not getting them. So whatever they decide to do there, they need to force defenses to pay a little bit more attention to the receivers, and that will open up the running game a lot more. So I'm not saying the Patriots are going to make that type of trade, but they need a number 2 guy to start to separate themselves, whether that's Boutte, whether that's getting Chisholm in the mix, or Demario Douglas turning things around. I like Mac Hollins, but he's never going to be that guy, right? He's in there to make big physical catches, 50-50 balls, and to block. That's what Mac Hollins is there for. And of course, Kyle Williams, right? You got to get him in the mix a little bit more. Maybe he can become that guy eventually. It just not right now. He seems to be that guy. But overall, the offense, again, this is a podcast where I'm saying what takes the Patriots from good to great. These are things that they're going to need to correct going forward. The defense also needs a bit more work than we'd like to think. Certainly, things are going well, right? I mean, the run defense is terrific. They're 4th in the NFL right now in terms of yards allowed, only behind the Green Bay Packers, the Cleveland Browns, and the Seattle Seahawks. And a lot of that is Robert Spillane's veteran presence at linebacker, along with the additions of Milton Williams and Kairos Tonga, who we really don't talk about enough, has been just incredible at clogging the lanes, great run stuffer, and has been pretty good in terms of rushing the quarterback, having that big body out there. And, you also have Christian Gonzalez back and healthy, along with Carlton Davis, who is allegedly healthy. Marcus Jones coming off of a terrific game on Sunday. But overall, the passing defense just has not been up to par so far this season. New England ranks 26th overall in the NFL in terms of passing defense right now. And a lot of that is their inability to defend against tight ends. We saw that last week. Dalton Kincaid seemed to just get open every play. They were stopping the receivers, but Dalton Kincaid was getting open easily. Same thing we saw with Brock Bowers back in week 1. Had a big game there. And sometimes they just get really cute out there, dropping Milton Williams back into coverage, Christian Barmore back into coverage. We saw them do that with Williams on Sunday, and then they ended up getting beat on a crosser to Kincaid. So they need to get better at defending the middle of the field. But even when they crack down on defending the middle of the field, that was basically their defensive strategy in Miami. They can get beat on the outside pretty easily. Hopefully now that Christian Gonzalez is back, that will help a little bit. But the pass defense hasn't been what we expect. And it's really on those guys outside of Carlton Davis, outside of Christian Gonzalez, to really step up. And sometimes you have Marcus Jones with, what is he, 5'6", 5'7", with these matchups against 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" tight ends. Like, you got to figure out a solution for that. As much as I like Marcus Jones, they need to get better at covering the middle of the field, and they need to get better at getting to the quarterback. I love the addition, Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, who seems to make big plays at the right time every week. But the numbers just haven't panned out, particularly these last few weeks. Right now, the New England Patriots rank 31st in the NFL in pressure rate. 31st. Now, their sacks are a little bit better, but they're still middle of the pack. They're 18th overall in sacks. A lot of that came early in the season. They weren't able to get to Josh Allen last week. They only had 1 sack. So they are missing that premier edge rusher. As much as I like some of the guys on this roster, and Harold Landry is making a big difference, they need that guy. And, you weren't going to take Abdul Carter. You took care of he wasn't available anyway, but you took care of the left tackle spot. At some point, you're going to have to prioritize that edge spot. And speaking of trades, Trey Hendrickson should be part of that conversation, right? Now, Cincinnati, they brought in Joe Flacco. It wasn't working very well with the Browning quarterback that they have out there. So maybe there's still some hope for Cincinnati if Flacco can get it together. But getting around the trade deadline, if the Bengals continue to struggle a little bit, that's a guy I would love to see the Patriots go out and acquire. They can afford to do this, right? They can afford to go after an A.J. Brown or a Trey Hendrickson. And I think it's probably a lot more important because the Patriots, frankly, have been more productive offensively than defensively this season, which is a huge surprise. Hendrickson, I think, is that missing X factor or just some sort of edge rusher that can make a difference. They really need to start getting to the quarterback, and that really has gotten worse week to week as the season's progressed. So what do we need to see the rest of the season? Drake Maye needs to take care of the football, continue throwing the football accurately. We need a number 2 wide receiver to emerge so defenses stop stacking the box and open up the running game. And even if that's not the case, they need to lean into their strengths of running the football and stop trying to do everything. Stop trying to do power runs and wide zones and duos and gaps and all this stuff. Like, pick what you're good at and stick with it and then run the offense based off of that if you're not able to establish the run. Simplify the defense a little bit so you're not blowing coverages by dropping Milton Williams back, and get to the quarterback more consistently. They need to do a better job. And finally, if they can, make a trade for a big player. The NFL trade deadline is not like baseball. It doesn't happen often that there are these big blockbuster trades midway through the season, but if the Eagles continue to struggle as they've done the last couple of weeks, there may be an opportunity for A.J. Brown. Cincinnati, if they continue to struggle, go after a guy like Trey Hendrickson. They have the money to make both of these moves if they want, but that might involve giving up some draft capital, which as good as the Patriots have looked, they still are basically in a rebuild right now, and maybe they don't want to do that. So making a trade midway through the season for a disgruntled player, perhaps you can get one of those elite players with just a second-round pick, but we're going to have to see. And if the Patriots have one of the better records in the NFL, that second-round pick's not going to mean too much. You may have to give up a first. So that'll be interesting to see. But let's look ahead to Sunday. Patriots going up against the New Orleans Saints. What do we need to see? What do we need to see from New England so they can continue progressing in the right direction? New York Giants played the Saints on the road last week. They turned the football over 5 times. No turnovers. Your KPI, key performing indicator for the Patriots. Take care of the football, no turnovers coming out of Sunday against New Orleans Saints. They also had just 1 sack last week. As I mentioned, I'd like to see at least 3 sacks coming out of this football game. Spencer Rattler's a pretty good quarterback, actually, and I know they have Tyler Shuck waiting to become the starter, but Rattler, who we kind of wrote off at the end of last season, has been a little bit better, so getting the quarterback is going to be very important on Sunday. Of course, establishing the run. New Orleans is not a great run defense, particularly between the tackles. If you want the power run to work, this is the week to make it happen. See if you can establish the run early and build the offense off of that. Penalties have also been a real issue all season long. Patriots, despite having 3 less penalties than Buffalo last week, they allowed more penalty yardage, 93 yards total. Keep it at 6 or less. I think that would be a successful outing if the Patriots have only 6 penalties or less. And finally, if they are going to make that leap, the Patriots, with their easy schedule most of the rest of the way, they need to beat up on bad football teams. They accomplished that against the Carolina Panthers. Time to do the same thing against the New Orleans Saints. They need to win by at least 2 scores. If this is winning by a field goal, great. They picked up a W. Can't complain about that, but I'd love to see them win by at least 9 points comfortably and continue to beat up on bad football teams. Because if it's close against New Orleans, then heck, it may be close against Tennessee. It may be close against Cleveland, Atlanta. And then you got to go on the road against Tampa. Got to beat up on all these teams the next few weeks, and that'll be a sign that Patriots are continuing to move in the right direction. But last Sunday was a great litmus test against the Buffalo Bills. Patriots succeeded with flying colors. Again, this was a minor critique podcast. What do they need to get better at? If they can get better in all of these areas, we're not just talking about a good football team. We're talking about a team that can contend in the AFC East and maybe even make a real playoff push down the road. But let me know if you disagree with me or what you'd like to see the Patriots do in the comments. I'm curious to hear from you. I'll be at the game Sunday in New Orleans, Section 101. Stop by and say hi if you're around. Hopefully, it's an easy blowout. Patriots wearing all white jerseys, white pants. The first time we've ever seen that with the new uniform look. So that'll be interesting. Sadly, I think the one low point from the Patriots winning these last 2 weeks is they're probably going to continue to run with the pajama pant blueberry look that I don't really like. But hey, they're winning football games. I don't really care. But going to be interesting on Sunday. Patriots have a real opportunity to improve to a 4-2 record, win their 3rd consecutive game. If they go out and it's a clunker, then this is a sign that, hey, this team just can't stay consistent. Consistency is the most important thing, and that starts with cleaning up these areas outlined on this podcast. But that's it for this episode of Pat's Cast. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'll see you Sunday from New Orleans.